Hello, everybody. Welcome to another SparkLoop office hours. We just opened the door, obviously, so we're just going to wait to let a few more people arrive here before we get started. So while we're waiting, I wanted to welcome you here. My name is Dylan. I am a content marketer here at SparkLoop, and today I'm joined by Alyssa Dulin from ConvertKit. She is the deliverability guru. I'm using the word guru way too many times on these office hours, but we try to invite the all-knowing when it comes to the topic we're discussing, so that you guys can fire your questions at these experts. So I'll let Alyssa introduce herself in just one moment, but before I do that, I just wanted to get everybody kind of well acquainted. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and say where you're from, where you're watching from, and feel free to also leave a link to your newsletter in the chat too, so we can all check it out and subscribe. And so we want to support you that way. And then the other thing I'll obviously mention is, as people are coming in here, we want to make this is an open AMA style chat. So we're talking email deliverability, but we don't have to necessarily focus, very hardcore on that topic. We can talk about newsletters. Alyssa and myself both have a lot of knowledge around newsletters, but if you do have, mostly email deliverability questions, this is the place to ask. So please don't be shy. Include your questions. There's no stupid questions. I know very little about email deliverability, so I'm sure I'll ask the really seemingly obvious questions to make everybody else feel smarter than me. So why don't we get started with just an intro from you, Alyssa. Let us know what you do and how you got into email deliverability.
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Alyssa Dulin. I work at ConvertKit and lead our deliverability team there. I've been doing deliverability for about 6 or 7 years, which is crazy. And it's really fun. I get to help the creators who use ConvertKit make sure that their emails go to the inbox and not the spam folder, which is very important. Live in Nashville, Tennessee. Trying to think if I answered all your questions. Does that cover it?
I think that's good. You also you have a podcast, is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, yeah. I'm glad you called that out. I have a podcast called Deliverability Defined. I can share the link in the chat, which is really fun. I do that with my coworker, Melissa, which is a little confusing. Our names are very similar, but she's awesome. And we don't just talk about email deliverability. We talk a lot about newsletters and email strategy and how to grow your list using Twitter and Instagram and things like that. So that's been really fun. And I have a newsletter myself called Deliverability Defined or Deliverability Dispatch. Deliverability Defined is the podcast. A lot of D's going on there. And that's also been really fun. If we want to talk about that, we can too. I actually run that through like an evergreen newsletter. So I'm not pressing send once a week. It's sort of all built out into a sequence, which is really helpful, especially because it's growing primarily through the ConvertKit creator network. So I'm getting new subscribers every day through that. Another thing we can talk about. And so they get to start at my very first email in the newsletter sequence. They don't kind of hop into where I am right now in my newsletter, and then they missed out on all those past editions. So I've been really enjoying that.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I think the evergreen newsletter is a very sustainable newsletter, which is cool. I've seen people do it really well, publish once and then just kind of set it to a sequence. So there's always people kind of starting from the beginning, and you're not having to necessarily always run that content hamster wheel every week, trying to come up with new content always to publish. So I love that. So we've got your podcast here, your newsletter. Awesome. So I think, again, for those people who came in before I mentioned this, this is basically an office hours where we're asking Alyssa anything to do with email deliverability. So please, if you have any questions, I'm sure you're wondering something about why your newsletter ended up in a spam folder, or what makes it go to a promotions tab. Any of those kinds of questions are more than welcome. So I will start off. I will be the guinea pig with the really I guess, low-hanging fruit. Stupid question, but what is email deliverability? let's start there. Like, let's talk about what that means. What does that term encompass and why it's important?
Yeah, that's a really good question because it's a very annoying word to say, and it's one that not a lot of people understand what it means. But when I start to explain it, I actually like to start by comparing delivery and deliverability. So email delivery is whether your email got delivered or bounced. So anytime you send an email, even if you send it, on like ConvertKit, or if you send it just in your own Gmail inbox, whenever you go to send that email, the recipient's server is going to say delivered, or they're going to say bounced. You're probably not going to know that it was delivered unless you got that bounced email. I think we've all seen where you send an email to someone and then you get an email back that's like, this email address doesn't exist. So that's delivery.
Yeah.
It's kind of binary and it's very easy to tell. So you can know whenever you send out like an email campaign or broadcast through ConvertKit or something else, you can really easily tell how many emails were delivered and how many emails were bounced. And it's very black and white. Deliverability is what happens past that point. So it's not so black and white. Unfortunately, it's pretty hard to know exactly what happened, but it's essentially, did your email make it to the inbox or not? And there is no metric that tells you like, hey, this landed in the inbox. Good job. It's sort of a metric you have to just guess at based on all of the data inputs you see, like your open rate, click rate. Are people emailing you and saying, hey, this went to my spam folder or not? Are people replying to you? So it's a little more gray area, but it's what we really all care about is, did that message land in the inbox or did it land in the spam folder or somewhere else?
Right. And I guess if you send out your weekly newsletter and you notice maybe after a day that you've got a noticeably lower amount of opens, for example, than you typically do. And then you hear anecdotally from a few of your subscribers that your newsletter, it was in my promotions tab, or it went to my spam inbox for some reason. What would be some reasons why all of a sudden your newsletter that typically is, delivering or has good deliverability, it's delivering and has good deliverability, going to the inbox might bounce to spam?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and one that I see people run into all the time. There are a lot of...
It might have happened to me once.
We might have talked about it.
Maybe.
There are a lot of reasons, surprisingly, maybe, that your message could go to the spam folder. So before I start listing the reasons, I'll just say I would highly recommend reaching out to your ESP. So whether that's ConvertKit or another ESP, and asking them for help, because what I see happen very often is someone has that experience and they try to diagnose it themselves, or they post on Twitter and say, hey, does anyone else have this going on? And I see the replies they get and they're like way off, just because, these aren't people who are looking into this every day. And I see a lot of people, unfortunately, waste time going down the wrong rabbit holes. So first step, reach out to, if you use ConvertKit, reach out to my team. I actually see Akash is in the chat. He's amazing. He works on our deliverability team at ConvertKit. So he might be the person you end up talking to, and he's so great. So, hey, if you don't use ConvertKit, hopefully your ESP has deliverability support. But now I'll get into some reasons. If you are, a DIY kind of person, you want to dig in. So one thing that could be happening is your message did go to the spam folder for a segment of people. And of course, there are underlying reasons under that. It could be an authentication issue, which is like the most technical thing that could go wrong. One way you can see if that's what happened is you can test the email yourself. So send it to yourself. I would use a Gmail address. It's sort of just the easiest to test with. And not to get too technical, but you can pull the message headers. Sounds harder than it is. It's pretty easy. In Gmail, you just click the little 3 dots at the top of the message and say, show original. And it's going to tell you right up there on the top if SPF, DKIM, and DMARC passed or failed. So if any of those things say fail, just like reach out to your ESP, get some help fixing that, but that's the issue. A lot of times that'll only be the issue if you have DMARC set up on your domain sometimes people don't know if they have that set up. So you can do a DMARC lookup of your domain. That's where things can get tricky. So that is one reason I see it fail a lot, and something my team helps with. Some little random things that could be happening that a lot of people don't know about, and I see people run into a lot. If you're using, or if you are sending a really long message or a message with a lot of content, it's possible that your message got clipped. And you've seen that happen in Gmail if you're reading a message and you get to the bottom and it says like show full message or something like that. When that happens, the open tracking pixel gets clipped as well. So people are still seeing your message. It's going to the inbox. They're opening it. It's just that you're not tracking those opens. So that's one reason I see people's open rates tank suddenly, and it's a pretty quick fix. They just don't send such long emails next time, and then it's all good.
Right.
Let's see.
Right.
There's so many things. Those are the biggest ones. The hardest one, and the one I want to help people not run into, is a reputation issue. That's sort of the that is, I'm trying not to read the chat too much while I talk or I'll get distracted. But that is like the big thing about deliverability that's super important, is to keep your sender reputation healthy. And if you don't do that, you can get into a position where your reputation is damaged at a specific mailbox provider, and then they start sending your emails to the spam folder. And when that happens, it is a long-ish road to get back to a good reputation. It's doing things like suppressing people who haven't opened in 30 days, like being really strict with your filtering and sending to your most engaged people for like 2 weeks, and then hoping that that resets your reputation and getting back to normal and fixing the root cause. But that is something that happens every now and then. But the reason why me and my coworkers do what we do is to like give proactive education about deliverability so that you don't get to that point.
Cool. Okay,
Yeah.
so we've got some questions coming in, and I'm going to put my own in the chat so I don't forget it. But why don't we start with Dylan, not myself, but another Dylan. Obviously, the two greatest names we have in this chat here, so that's awesome. So Dylan asks, I recently migrated my 30,000 subscribers to Klaviyo, and Gmail was not happy at all. They seem to have completely blacklisted us, very low open rates from only Gmail. I've read about warming up my list by sending to only engaged readers. Is this something you would advise? And do you have any other advice?
Yes. So I'm so sorry that happened to you. That is so rough. We at ConvertKit are very careful for all people who move over who have larger lists. We build a custom ramp up plan. So I would definitely encourage you to do that at Klaviyo. I know you've already run into the issue, so you might have to kind of like backtrack and restart with your warm up plan. It's custom to every sender. There isn't really a blanket warm up plan, but in general, I would say send first to your most engaged subscribers. So people who have opened in the last 30 days or so. Once that looks good, add in more people. So people who have opened in the last 90 days, and then increase it from there. The reason why I say to like keep adding people in is that if you break it up into chunks, that means your third send is going to be to like a pretty unengaged group of people, or maybe your fourth send. So you're sort of undoing the good work you just did. You're like, hey, look, Gmail, my open rates are awesome. And then next send, you're like, nope, not anymore. Nope, not anymore. So instead, adding them in is a better strategy to keep that engagement high.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. In terms of email length, we talked about message clipping. And I see it happen sometimes on even what seem to be very short emails in my Gmail inbox, when not that I'm sending, but that I'm receiving. And then sometimes it feels like there's a really long email and then it doesn't get clipped at all, or just the very end of it gets clipped. So Timothy asks, what the email length, is there any, or with the email length, is there any, is there a recommended word count to stay under? I know it has something to do with kilobytes, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And my follow-up question to that is, do images or GIFs affect the size?
Yeah, so you did a really good job explaining. Text isn't so much the problem. It's usually like the files that you're including in your message and the images and GIFs and videos and things like that. So more so than word count, I would try and pay attention to the file size of your email. I know that can be annoying to try and keep up with. And I would say 100 kilobytes and below is the sweet spot. So try to keep it under that 100 KB mark. But
Can I
yeah.
pause you there for a sec? How do you know your kilobyte size?
That's what I was just about to say. That can be annoying. No, you're good.
Okay, sorry.
We're on the same page. So
Nice.
I can tell you how to do that, and I will tell you how to do that. But instead of trying to do that, because it's a few steps, I would just make sure that every time you're going to send an email, send yourself a test, again, to a Gmail address. If you don't have a Gmail address, they're free. Set up a test one, and scroll down to the bottom every time. Make sure it doesn't say clipped, and you're good to go. If you do, you're just curious, you want to know your file size, you can do that step I talked about earlier. Look at your message, click the 3 dots, say show original, and then you're going to get a new page with a bunch of code looking stuff. But there's a button that says download message. Click that message, download your email, open it up in your Finder, or I don't know what PCs say, but look at the file on your computer and see what the file size is. And that'll tell you how big your email is.
Got it. And that will, when you download it, that would include any images you included, correct? Or graphics? Yeah. Okay. I thought I heard, maybe you can debunk this. I thought I heard that images don't actually get included in the total file size of the email, since some people can turn their images off when they receive emails. Is that true?
I would say if the person has images turned off, then that's probably true for them. But for the people with images turned on, it would count towards the file size.
Oh, it would. Okay.
As far as I know, unless something's changed lately, but it's definitely the emails that have a ton of images in them that I see usually get clipped. And usually the emails that are super, super styled with a lot of coding are the ones that I see get clipped the most.
Right. So if somebody's doing a very stylized HTML heavy email, that's where that can run into trouble. Okay. And that would be a good test. Set up a test, send it to your test Gmail account, download that email by clicking on the 3 dots, and then see what the file size is. And that's not a one-step process to figure it out, but at least you'll eventually find out if your email is going to deliver. That's all, or get clipped, I should say. And so again, going back to what you're saying, if an email does get clipped, that can affect your deliverability or your deliverability.
It mainly just affects your metrics. So you might think your deliverability is in trouble because your open rate's tanked, but actually your message might be going straight to the inbox. Everything is fine. It's just that open tracking pixel was clipped. So you're not able to see who's opening your messages.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. Okay, cool. So a friend here asks, when sending to Yahoo and affiliate links to my newsletter, and adding affiliate links to my newsletter, I'm seeing lower open rates. What would you do here? I don't notice any difference in performance with Gmail.
Very interesting. Yeah. Some mailbox providers really don't like types of affiliate marketing. I'd be curious to know what those affiliate links look like, but I would say check out, it's hard to know without the context, but I would ask, is the domain of the affiliate link a shared type of link? And by that, I mean, is it like a link hosting website where other people can add their content as well? Sort of like a Bitly or, some sort of link shortener. Those tend to cause problems with email deliverability because you are sharing the reputation of that domain with anyone who's using it. So, and that's another, even if it's not shared, that affiliate domain you're using, it might have a reputation issue. Every link you include in your email has its own reputation. So if you're including a link in your message, you want to make sure you're okay with that reputation impacting your deliverability. So I would say that's probably the issue there. I would see if there's any other domain you can use to still get to what you're wanting. Maybe you could route them to your website where then you list all your affiliate links.
Right. Where you have hopefully a better reputation, domain reputation, right? Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. We got more questions flying in here, which is awesome. And I want to talk a little bit about maybe later on about Bitly and what I was doing when I was on Substack, and maybe that affected some of my deliverability issues. But we'll get into that maybe later. So Kennedy is asking if you have any other tips for ways to prepare for migrating a newsletter from one provider to another. And I just before you answer that, I'll say I forgot to mention this in the beginning, but Alyssa and I first connected because that was exactly what I was trying to do with my Substack newsletter. I was noticing some deliverability issues, some friends saying they never even received my newsletter and they were clearly on my Substack list. Now, this was about a year and a half ago, so maybe things have changed there. But I knew that it was time for me to maybe look at other options. And so I reached out to the ConvertKit team, and basically I was like, what do? I want to migrate. Am I going to lose all my subscribers or what? So I will hand that over to you because this is a question near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. So just to recap, in case anyone joined late, the biggest thing is ramping up your list. I won't get into it too much, especially if you have a list, I would say like 20K and greater, it's going to get more and more important that you ramp up that list. To share a little.
And how would you ramp it up?
So it's okay.
Sorry.
You're going to start with your most engaged subscribers. If you're able to get that data from your last ESP. I know MailChimp, for example, has like subscriber ratings. So those are great for warming up. I love when people come over from MailChimp. I'm like, okay, perfect. Send to your 5-star subscribers. And then the next week, send to your 5 and 4-star subscribers. And then 5, 4, 3, and so on. So start with your most engaged. And between each send, kind of do a check-in. Does everything look okay? Open rates look good. Complaint rates are low. Okay, cool. I'm going to go on to the next cohort. Just so you know, like why that's important. Basically, I mentioned reputation earlier. So your sending domain has a reputation, sort of like a credit score with each mailbox provider. Most mailbox providers are not going to tell you what your reputation is, unfortunately, but you have one. And they sort of have it dialed in and they know what to expect from your mail. They know what IP addresses you normally send from. They know what to expect. So the second you make a change to the way you send emails, like you start sending from a bunch of different IP addresses, which is what happens when you switch ESPs, they have to throw that score out the window because they are like, is this that person? Something's changed. Is this a spammer pretending to be them? Because that happens all the time. So what you want to do is ease their minds. I talk about it like there's a human looking, there's not, but still, you want to ease their minds and like put your best foot forward with that first send from your new ESP and send to your most engaged. So once they see those open rates are super high, people are loving the messages, that's going to help them be like, oh, okay, this is them. They have a good reputation. We're not worried about it. If you move to a new ESP, send to your full list, especially if you have a large list, that's going to look very suspicious to mailbox providers. They're going to be afraid that a spammer is pretending to be you. Because that is such a huge change, and they're going to be more likely to send it to the spam folder out of safety for your subscribers. And then you have to kind of work to prove yourself with each send. So it's a lot harder to get your deliverability up that way. But I want to make sure I answer Kennedy's question because that was just the ramp up part. Some other tips I have is I like when people send an email from their old ESP before they leave and say, hey, heads up, subscribers, I'm going to make a change. I'm switching to a new provider. Please do me a favor and, add my sending address to your address book or your safe senders list. You can tell them, if you see my message land in the promotions tab, please drag it over to the primary tab, things like that. And then another great thing to do is encourage replies to your emails once you're sending from that new ESP. Replies are the most positive signal you can send to the mailbox providers to say, people love this message. And it makes them feel like the message is more transactional instead of a bulk message like you would see from like a large retailer saying, here's 20% off or whatever. So they're going to prioritize your messages. So once you're on that new ESP, think of creative ways to encourage your subscribers to reply to your message, to really give your reputation a boost.
Awesome. That kind of answers a few other questions we have here as well about really getting the ways to get people kind of in your inbox as well. So I'm I'm just gonna, sorry, I've lost my spot here as I was sorting through these questions. So is there any recommendation for links? So somebody, a friend asks, I see some emails that have a ton of links and others that have none. Is there a rule of thumb, and do links affect open rates? We kind of touched on this a little bit about link shorteners and the actual reputation of the sites that you're linking to. So maybe you could provide some more insight to recommendations for links.
I would say in general, it depends. Overall, there isn't a rule that's, says something like, don't include more than 20 links or whatever. But I would say to keep the following things in mind. One, again, the reputation of the link is really important. If you link to your website or another website you trust, even like youtube.com is usually fine. Trying to think of like common links, but any like retailer or whatever, any website that's like controlled and has a team of people making sure that it's not being abused is usually fine. Anything that's like, again, a link shortener is the most common one I see people link to. Even sadly, teachers pay teachers, if you're familiar with that. We have a lot of teachers who use ConvertKit, and I've seen some run into issues when they link there because I guess they have had some trouble with spam. So all that to say, if it's a reputable website, it should be fine to link to. And if it's not one that gets utilized by spammers a lot, like Bitly does. Otherwise, ratio, I would say, is important in general in your message when it comes to images and text and links. I would make sure there's not like every word has a link on it. That could look suspicious and spammy. So make sure they're kind of spaced out a bit. And it could influence promotions tab placement. We haven't really gotten into that yet, but the promotions tab isn't the spam folder. I know it's tough. A lot of people don't like it. They don't like to land there. And I think it is possible for links to be what sends you there. So just keep an eye on that. If you are really not wanting to be in the promotions tab, you might want to do some testing and see if the links you're using are affecting that.
Okay, so that leads me to, there's some other great questions here, but I just want to follow up on that, the promotions tab. What would get somebody into the promotions tab versus the index?
Yeah. So I recently did a lot of testing on the promotions tab to try and help people answer this question. And sadly, the results are not super encouraging. But what I do have are some steps you can do to promote primary tab placement. But when it comes to the promotions tab, it does not work as you would think it would. So, it's all controlled by algorithms and robots and machine learning. And with that comes a lot of things that don't make sense. So I'll give an example. I was helping out a creator on ConvertKit with a lot of subscribers, and he has a really great newsletter. And it was landing in promotions when it normally lands in primary. So he was wanting to do some testing and see what's causing it. So I decided to do a lot of testing. And there were some messages where I could isolate what caused the message to go to the promotions tab. I would remove a single sentence and it would go to primary. But it was crazy. Like this creator had ads in his newsletter, and it wasn't the ads, the butcher block or whatever ads. It was a weird sentence that was like, my son and I went to the park yesterday. And that would be the thing. I know. I was shocked. So, and with this creator, obviously, since I was able to do that, he would often message me and be like, what's happening? Can you do it again? And which he and I both got to the point after testing so many messages where we were like, this isn't worth it because there is no rhyme or reason. It doesn't make any sense. Every time I tested a message of his, it was never the promotional content that made it go to promotions. It was always the most random thing you wouldn't expect. So all that to say, it's really not worth trying to game the algorithms and, get around them because they're always changing too. So if you do find something that works, it's probably not going to work the next time. But what you can do is, again, influence or encourage your subscribers to drag your message to the primary tab. That will definitely put your messages in their primary tab if they do that. And that helps give your subscribers the control. Some of them might want your messages in the promo tab, so that helps them decide where they want it. Second, again, encouraging replies. that's a really great step to take because it helps Gmail think your messages are more transactional, and so they should go to primary. And then otherwise, just keeping your reputation really healthy, sending to your most engaged subscribers when you can, cleaning out your lists regularly, things like that are going to help you land in the primary tab more so than promotions tab, where people like Target and Amazon and whatever are going, because those huge retailers don't clean their list very often. So if you have a really highly engaged list, that's going to look to Gmail more like you belong in primary.
Okay. Awesome advice. One thing you said actually made me think about single and double opt-in and its effect on deliverability, which I don't want to ask yet because there's a lot of great questions here. So I'll save that for a bit. But so Timothy asks a question about different departments at his company. They use different software for client, subscriber, sales, and communication, like ActiveCampaign, SalesLoft, and Attack software. And they've noticed that sometimes their emails are heading to spam from our regular Gmail account. Is there any insight on how to remediate this?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I'm curious about the setup, but I see this happen a lot if throughout the company, everyone's using the same domain. And I see you said sales. So if the sales team is doing cold outreach using the same domain that you're using in your regular Gmail account, that is going to impact the reputation of the domain all across the board, including your Gmail address. So there's a good chance the cold outreach sales is doing is hurting the domain and your regular Gmail emails. To remediate that, I would highly recommend the sales team use a subdomain if they're not already. And the reputations aren't totally separate, but it helps add a little separation. So an example would be, sales.yourdomain.com. And then your regular Gmail emails come from companydomain.com. They're still connected so that your sales team can't run totally wild and just go nuts. It'll still impact a little bit, but it's sort of like, this is a silly analogy I've used before, but it's like how your family member's reputation kind of impacts your reputation, but not totally. Like you're still two different people. You can have your own reputation, but
you got the same last name.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but that can help a little bit. So that's the first step I would take if that's not already happening.
Awesome. Okay, that's really interesting. That's really good advice. Yeah, I could see that being strategically used, especially and how that could cause issues when you're sending out a blast of cold emails to people who are just deleting not even opening and deleting them and stuff like that. So that's awesome. Okay, so Timothy, yes, I got the right one here. Timothy asked, do you recommend encouraging email list subscribers to do anything that will help with email delivery, like save as a contact, move to a folder? I know you did touch on this a little bit. Is there anything else other than encouraging them to respond? I think you mentioned as a good strategy. Mm-hmm. Does them clicking a link in your newsletter to a reputable domain, does that help as well, or is there anything else that people can do to that they can encourage their readers to do to improve their deliverability?
Yeah, I've never articulated it this way, so hopefully it's helpful. But this was a really good question, Timothy, because it's helping me think in a new way. But I feel like there are a couple different buckets to put those actions in. So there are actions your subscribers can take that will help boost your reputation. So those are great. And that is the things like replying, which is the biggest one. But then opening and clicking, that's always great. They're just sort of little positive signals that are good. And then the replying is like strong positive. And then there are actions that don't really affect your reputation, but they're actions your subscribers can take on their end to kind of customize their email setup and help make your emails always go to their inbox. So everyone's email is set up in a unique way. If they're using Gmail or Yahoo, their email is controlled by Gmail or Yahoo. If they're using a custom domain, like a B2B address, they might have really strict filters in place, especially, we see that with .edu addresses, .gov addresses. So that's where these bucket items come in really handy because it's essentially overriding whatever their tech team has set up and saying like, I want these messages. So that is the things like saving as a contact or adding as a safe sender, those sorts of things, setting a high priority, or I would say like allow listing is sort of what we call that. And that's the same as dragging from promotions to primary. That might not have a huge impact on your overall reputation at Gmail, but it's going to train Gmail with this specific mailbox that they always want your messages to land in the primary tab. So it's still a great thing to encourage. It's just sort of those, I would say, like two separate buckets of good things to do and why.
Okay, very awesome. That's a good way to think about it. We have another question from Jesse, and he said he just checked the last few newsletters that he sent, and they were 114, 115, and 138 kilobytes. Is that an issue in and of itself? Because it doesn't seem to be getting clipped.
Well, I'm definitely glad it's not getting clipped. Gmail says they usually clip at 102 specifically. So I'm glad that they're not doing it. I don't know why they're not, but that's good. I would say, I mean, if everything looks okay to you, your open rates look okay, Gmail's not clipping, I wouldn't worry about it. If you start getting clipped at Gmail and you have a lot of Gmail subscribers, you will definitely know about it. So it's not one of those things that's going to creep up on you. If I see someone getting clipped at Gmail, their open rates are usually in like the single digits. So if everything was looking okay, it's one of those things I'd say, don't worry about it unless it, starts getting clipped. Then you can change things up.
Yeah, I guess right? Like if you start getting replies from people or you're testing yourself and you see it getting clipped, that it very well could be that length issue. Cool. Friend asks, if I were to wrap the link, would that help? I'm not sure if that might be a follow-up question to another.
It might be the affiliate link question, if I had to guess. And I would say it depends. There are some mailbox providers that will check the link all the way to like the destination to determine if it's safe or if they like it. Not all mailbox providers do. So this is one of those things where I would say try testing. I always encourage testing where you can and where it's sort of low stakes. So maybe send an email next time, try wrapping the links if that's an easy thing for you to do, and notice, does the open rate look higher? Are people reporting it went back to their inbox? If not, then that's where I would recommend doing something like linking to your website, where you have a list of affiliate links.
Yeah. And could you explain just what wrapping the link would mean for people like not me, but other people who might not understand what that means?
I'm assuming they mean, hopefully I even understand it right, but I'm assuming they mean like redirecting the link. I could be wrong. So like we actually do this at ConvertKit, and most ESPs do, where all of your links in your ConvertKit emails are going to say click.convertkit-mail.com or something like that. So we're wrapping the link. That helps us track whether the link was clicked or not. So I assume they're talking about doing something similar on their end, where they first direct someone to like a link that they have or own, and then they immediately reroute it to that destination URL of the affiliate link. But let me know if I'm wrong.
Got it.
Friend.
Cool. Okay. So Eric asks, what are the positives and negatives to including the first couple paragraphs of your newsletter, then linking to your website to read the rest of it, which is an amazing question.
Yeah, I love that one. A couple positives would be, one, if you're struggling with that clipping issue, that's a good way to not have so much content in your email and your messages are less likely to be clipped. But another one is it kind of forces engagement. Instead of everyone getting exactly what they need from your email, you're having them click a link, which is a positive signal, and that's good for your reputation. And then also once they're at that link, assuming it's, your website, like you said, if you have other offers there, it could help sales to sort of get them onto your website, and maybe they'll see something else that grabs their attention, like a link to your ebook or a link to your course, where they might not have seen that before in your email. Negatives, there might be people who are just wanting that skimmability. They're in a hurry and they just kind of want to be able to breeze through your email. And so it's giving them one extra step to get to that content. And maybe they aren't in a place where they want to do that. So you might for certain audiences see less engagement. This is another thing I would say it'd be really cool to test this. So send some emails where you don't have a link that goes to your website. You include all the content. Send a few that do, and see what happens. How many people are clicking that link? Are you seeing, like I said, like, oh, well, these people are going to my website, and then I also see they're signing up for this other thing on my website. So I would say test it and see how it goes. I think every audience is different in how they would respond to that.
And it's really an individual thing too, right? Like some people prefer to just like live in their inbox and not leave and go off to websites to read longer articles. They'd rather just consume it there. And other people, for myself, for example, when I'm consuming newsletters, I'm usually skimming for curated links and stuff to, read about kind of the newsletter realm and stuff like that. So I like to go to those sites to save those articles when they're good to repurpose. So yeah, it's such a personalized question as well in terms of just a user experience too. I guess that would also, it makes me think, is there any impact on sender reputation at all when somebody is like, what I often do is I'll open an email and I'll see, oh, this is good, but I don't have time to read this yet. So I like mark it as unread and then come back to it over maybe once or twice. Does that in any way impact sender reputation at all?
That's such a good question. It depends, yes-ish. So each mailbox provider calculates the read time that a subscriber took through the email and knows, like,
Really?
but we don't know that. It's like their secret information. So like Gmail, for example, is calculating how long someone spends on an email, and that is going to influence your reputation and your inbox placement. But again, this is, it's going to be on a large scale. If most of the people who open your message are opening it and then clicking out just to make it read, Gmail is smart enough to be like, that's not a real, open, in the sense that they were enjoying the content and scrolling through. So that it's an interesting thing that sadly senders we don't have that information. So we can't really do much about it. If it says they opened, we treat them as an open. We can't, do something different because they just opened it and left. But it is a thing that mailbox providers are tracking and using.
So then the length of time that somebody is reading your email can positively impact, it sounds like it could positively impact your deliverability or your sender reputation at least.
Yeah, I wouldn't make your email super long. It's not,
right.
It's not like a direct correlation, but I think Gmail has some technology that tells them like this was a true open. They looked through the message versus they literally opened it and went on to the next email just to make it show as read. Because that, a lot of people do that just to get to inbox 0.
Interesting. Yeah, well, true. I'm also guilty of that too. So, okay, great. So we got a few more great questions here. So, by the way, keep them coming. We're still going to be around for another 10 or 15 minutes. You've kind of answered this one a little bit as well. Timothy asked, what's the best practice for cleaning up email lists and who should we focus on sending to? And I'm guilty of, just to add on to Timothy's question here about cleaning up my email list, I didn't do it for like a year. The first year I was on ConvertKit, I was so like attached to my email list size. I'm like, no, I can't, delete cold subscribers or anything like that. And so it probably was to some degree impacting me negatively to have those cold subscribers always getting my emails. But I'll hand it over to you. What's the best practice for doing the list cleanup and who should we focus on sending to?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I wrote a newsletter about this recently, so it's up in the chat if you need to scroll up if you want to subscribe. But I'll also give a good version here, hopefully. It depends, but I would say it depends on a couple things. Are you having an active deliverability issue or not? That's the biggest thing. That will really dramatically change what strategy I think you should take here. But I would say if you're not having any active deliverability issues, you just want to be proactive, I would not do anything too crazy. A good place to start is to look at anyone who hasn't opened an email in the last 6 months and start to put them on a different content path. So I wouldn't keep sending them your regular content. I would put them in a re-engagement sequence and try and remind them of why they signed up and get them back into being engaged. So that's going to look different for every single sender. But I would think of it as like the best of for your content. And it can be really personal, like, hey, I want to make sure I'm serving you. Like, tell me more about what you're looking for. What are your biggest challenges? And trying to get more information. For some senders who are just like selling things, it could be sending really great coupons, giving exclusive access to things.
Right.
So I would think about, what does your audience resonate with? What do you know about them so far? And how can you deliver over the top value in a re-engagement sequence? I would make that about 3 or 4 emails. And then the final one is that, do you still want to be on my list kind of email, where they need to click and confirm that they still want to be there. And if they don't click, I would unsubscribe them, which I know is hard for a lot of people. Like you said, Dylan, it's tough to let go. But
It's just the vanity metric.
yes,
That's
it
all
is.
it is.
And I have, working at ConvertKit with so many senders, I have seen firsthand what happens when someone has a reputation issue. It's so sad. Like, even their great subscribers who love their content don't see their messages. They all go straight to the spam folder, and nobody wants that. So it's way easier to let go of these people who aren't providing value to you. It's just not a good fit. Time to say goodbye, and still give a great experience to your really engaged subscribers who want to be there. If you do have an active deliverability issue and you need to clean your list to solve that, that's pretty different. I would immediately stop sending to subscribers who haven't opened in the last 90 days. Only send to your most engaged subscribers for 2 weeks. And then once your open rates are back to normal, slowly send emails to those cold subscribers of like, do you still want to be on my list? And that's if, again, like something really bad has happened. Maybe you haven't cleaned your list in years and Gmail decided that you belong in the spam folder. So that's like damage control.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going through a re-engagement. I try to do it once every quarter or so. Do like a cold subscriber re-engagement sequence. I don't have a very big list, so it's not I don't think too damaging to not do it more frequently, but maybe I'm wrong. So I'll be interested to see. I find the people who are not reading my newsletter are probably not for a reason, and it is one of those things where it's like, as much as you want to cling to those vanity metrics, it's like better for them to be on their way, and for everybody else to be able to read your email. So Dylan asks a question about frequency for open rates, which I've never thought about. This is a very interesting question. So I send one once per week, and I'm considering sending 3 per week to make it more of a habit for my readers. But would sending 3 emails per week make it more likely to be considered spam?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I hate to say it depends for everything, but it does depend. But yeah,
It does.
if I'm getting really general about, like, we send over 2 billion emails a month, so I get to see a lot, which is helpful. I see usually that once per week is the sweet spot. And once you get to more than once a week is where you start to see things drop off, unless you just have like an extremely engaged audience who is so excited to get all your emails, which is awesome. And, it works for some people. But I would say for the most part, 1 to 2 times a week is the sweet spot. And those 2 emails should be really different. One example of someone who does this well is Tim Ferriss, who uses ConvertKit. And, he has this Friday newsletter that's the same, like every Friday, same structure.
5
Yeah.
Bullet Friday.
Is
it? Yeah.
And then on, I think, Tuesdays, they send just like a new from Tim kind of email that's links and podcasts and things like that, just to keep everyone in the loop. So if a structure like that works well for you, that's awesome. But one thing I see happen sometimes is someone will say, oh, my open rates have really dropped. I don't know what's going on. And we can really clearly see, like, oh, you started sending to everyone a lot more and people got fatigued and they actually dropped off in their engagement. One way to think about that is, like, if you have a subscriber, Bob, who's going to open 1 email from you a week, that's just the way he is. Like, that's kind of his cadence. So if you send him 1 email a week, he's great. He's opening all your emails. That's awesome. But if you send him 3 emails a week, he's only going to open 1 out of 3. That just made his engagement a lot lower and made him send a lot more negative signals every time you send him an email. So not to say you shouldn't do it, but I think 1 to 2 is typically the sweet spot, and I'd only do 3 if you've really like tested and seen, oh, this works great for my list.
Awesome. Great answer. Cordell asks, are there any ideas for encouraging subscribers to reply or engage? He's finding this difficult. Also, is verified sending domain something worth setting up on ConvertKit? That was a good question too, because I know I struggled setting that up at the very beginning as well. So let's answer the first question about encouraging subscribers to reply or engage, and then the verified sending domain.
Yeah. Oh, I love both of these questions. They're so good. So when it comes to replying, it might take some time to figure out like what resonates well with your audience. I know in every newsletter I send, I encourage replies, and I'm happy if I get like 1 or 2. And a lot of times it's a pretty broad, like, you have any questions? Let me know. And sometimes people do, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
There are times I've seen people send an email and they get a ton of replies. So I can talk about that as like maybe something we can all learn from. But one example is from Nathan Barry, the ConvertKit CEO. In one of his newsletters, he said at the bottom something like, P.S. I'm thinking of starting a private newsletter all about money, a paid newsletter where he's going to like share all his financial details. And he especially made it clear that it was going to be kind of exclusive and not widely shared. And it was like, reply if you are interested. And he got so many replies. It was nuts. So that was probably great for his deliverability. So I think there is something to be learned there about scarcity mindset, making it feel like a relationship.
Urgency, maybe?
Urgency. Making it feel special and like a relationship with your audience. That's a great way to encourage replies. But then I've also seen people get really fun with it, where like at the bottom of their email, they're like, I'm loving this song right now. Reply and tell me the song you're listening to this week, or, what's your favorite movie? Some people love stuff like that and it goes really well. So I think that's, again, like every audience is different and you can do lots of different tests to see what results in a lot of replies and what doesn't. I've also seen some people be so transparent and say, if you reply to this message, my deliverability gets a boost. Please reply and say hi. And I've done it. Like I've seen that in the welcome email. Someone will say that, say, please reply. It'll help my deliverability. And I'm like, hey, happy to be here. So people love to help you too if they're on your list.
Yeah. And if they're a fan of your content and everything. Yeah, that makes sense. So can we address the verified sending domain, setting that up in ConvertKit?
Yes. So the best way I like to think about the verified sending domain, first of all, I'll get this part out of the way, is that if you have something called DMARC set up on your domain, you have to have a verified sending domain. So if you're not sure if you do or not, you can just Google DMARC, look up, enter your domain, and it'll tell you if you do or not. If you do, you have to have.
And that's DMARC?
Yes. Yes. So that's one reason why someone must have a verified sending domain. And that's one of the reasons why sometimes we'll see someone have a bunch of bounces or emails go to spam, is that they have DMARC, but they don't have the verified sending domain in place. So that's kind of one bucket of people who have to have it. For everyone else who doesn't have a DMARC record set up, they're usually wondering, should I do this or not? Here's my advice. So if you have really great open rates and you send regularly enough, at least once a month, hopefully a little more than that, then you should be totally fine to set up a verified sending domain and it should work well for you. If your deliverability / open rates are struggling a bit, maybe they're honestly anything less than 20% right now, I would say is on the low end with, all the automatic opening happening. But if you have open rates less than 20% and or you send pretty sporadically, there's not a lot of regularity to your sending. Maybe you'll send 2 emails in December and then you don't send in January and then you send again in February. In those cases, a verified sending domain, VSD, doesn't usually work well. The reason why is that when you set up a verified sending domain, essentially what you're doing is the message is always going to look like it comes from you in that from address that everyone sees. But in the background of the message, the robots see other sending email addresses back in the infrastructure. If you don't have a verified sending domain set up, ConvertKit's domains are in the background. If you set up a verified sending domain, your domain is in the background. So if you feel comfortable getting to the inbox on your own with your reputation, A verified sending domain is awesome, and it helps you, only use your reputation to get there. You won't have that weird thing in Gmail where it says like via convertkit.com at the top of your message.
Right.
But if you're a sender who isn't super comfortable or you don't have the reputation needed to get to the inbox on your own, I've seen actually some people have a way better deliverability when they remove their verified sending domain, because ConvertKit is so on top of reputation. We have a compliance team.
Right.
We're making sure everything is great, that we actually help you get in the door and get into the inbox better than your domain reputation on its own. But then again, some people do great with a VSD. So it's sort of not black and white, but one cool thing is that it's really not too hard to set up, adding to CNAME records. And if you send out an email after setting it up and it went terribly, you can just remove it and you'll go right back to sending the way you were sending without the VSD, and it's no big deal. I mean, it's hard that one email didn't go super well, but you could resend to unopened, without the VSD, and you've learned from it.
Oh man, we're sent to unopens. That's a whole other topic we could get into.
I know, there's so many.
Single and double opt-in.
I know.
We might have to have you back, Alyssa. We're getting a little bit tight for time. There's 2 more questions. If we could go through these. Jesse asks about click rate, which tanked significantly, even though the open rates have stayed strong. Is there any technical reason this could be happening? They really want people reading their articles, which obviously it sounds like they link to their news or media site to read those articles from the newsletter.
Yeah, this is a super interesting one. I have 2 kind of like ideas of what could be happening without having more context. One idea that I hope isn't the case, but I see it sometimes, is that there are actually a lot of automatic clicks happening for a lot of senders right now. So that's when you send a message and right after you send it, it says a bunch of people clicked your links. But what really happened is the subscriber's mailbox provider went and checked all the links for safety and then delivered the message once it saw that everything is safe. So what I've seen happen sometimes is that people will have huge fluctuations between their emails, where sometimes the link checking happened, sometimes it didn't. And when the link checking is happening, their click rates look really great and high. And then if that doesn't happen on one email, it looks like the click rate is tanking. But actually, it's just normal and there's not bots involved. So that can happen. Like, you might be more likely to see click tracking happening by bots if they're concerned about your sender reputation or the reputation of links in your email. So you might send an email one day where they're not concerned about any of the domains you link to, so they don't do that automatic clicking, and that's when you see your click rate is low. But in reality, what you're seeing is like, oh, there's no bots involved. So I don't know that that's what's happening here, but that is a potential. Another thing I would look at is the format of the email and the clicks, if anything changed there. I always highly recommend using a button where you can for link clicking, because again, a lot of people are skimming through emails and they want to see that really clear call to action on where they should click. So I would check and make sure your links aren't buried in text and kind of hard to navigate to. Another thing, I'm going to try not to get too in the weeds here. I know we don't have much time, but if you are copy and pasting like a long URL and just putting it in your message, I highly recommend against that. So again, putting it into a button instead that says like, read the article here. It can actually hurt deliverability to just paste a full URL into your email. The reason why is that if you're using an ESP like ConvertKit, it looks like you're being misleading because the link is typed out to say like facebook.com/whatever, but it's actually going to click.convertkit.com. So the mailbox provider is like, this is weird. You're saying it's going to this place, but it's going to another place. So that's another thing I see happen sometimes and cause some issues.
Okay, awesome. And that makes sense too, which is funny because if you bury a link in text as a hyperlink, the words are and the link go to different places. But I guess when you're pasting a full link, they're going to try to match that up more so, and it might look more fishy that way, I guess. Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's go to the last. We're right up for time here. If you don't mind, let's see if you have one more minute to just talk through this last question from Timothy. He says, is it better to have a send from name as your personal name or a company name? Have you seen this affect open rates or deliverability?
Yeah, great question. It'll affect open rates and deliverability mainly by it depends on what do subscribers recognize the easiest. So, for example, if you're a
Right.
company and everyone signed up to ConvertKit's newsletter, for example, and then suddenly you get an email from Alyssa Dulin, you're probably going to be like, what is this? Is this spam? I don't know Alyssa Dulin. But a lot of companies will do that to kind of make the email look friendlier or whatever. But in reality, it usually leads to people not opening because they think it's just a cold email or marking as spam because they're confused about who this person is. And then vice versa. If you're a creator with a really strong like personal brand and identity, and everyone's like, oh, I signed up to so and so's newsletter, then putting the company name might be confusing or cause less engagement. So I would just try and ask yourself, for most people who signed up through your list, when they did that, what was the branding they saw? What do they recognize most? And then use that. But if you aren't really sure, you can always combine them. So saying Alyssa Dulin from ConvertKit, for example, people do that. And then that way you're hitting both audiences and everyone is on the same page.
I've been there where it's been like I'm getting this email from a person who I don't recognize, and I open it kind of uncertainly or without certainty of who it's from, and I see, oh, it's from that brand that or that newsletter I subscribe to, or vice versa. I get a newsletter or an email in my inbox from a newsletter that I had no idea where I signed up for it, and then I read through. I'm like, oh, right, yeah, okay, I remember the creator, the person publishing it. So I do sort of what you recommended at the end. There was I include my first name. So my emails, my newsletter comes into your inbox as Dylan at Growth Currency. And so it's kind of like you're going to probably recognize one or the other. Chances are, I would think, if you did subscribe intentionally. So that's a great point of feedback and recommendation there. Well, I think we went through them. There were some really good questions here. So thank you, Alyssa, for sticking around for the hour with us. And like I said, we got it. There's questions that we didn't even get into, and I'd like to pick your brain on a few of them, just selfishly. But we'll let you go. You've got you're busy at ConvertKit these days, so again, maybe share where people can find you. Obviously at ConvertKit, but if you want to share any other places you like to hang out online.
Yeah, I tweet sometimes, but I'm definitely monitoring that every day. So feel free to follow me there and I can follow you back. It's Alyssa_Dulin. The podcast is Deliverability Defined. The newsletter is Deliverability Dispatch. And we have an Instagram also called Deliverability Defined if you're on Instagram, and we will post little video clips from the podcast there. So feel free to follow us there.
Cool. Awesome.
Cool.
Will do. Thank you everyone for coming, and stay tuned for our next office hours TBD, but we'll have more of these coming up in May. So thank you, Alyssa. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Bye.
No problem. Bye.